iHeartRadio. The opinions expressed on the following sponsored program are strictly those of the host, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of this station, its staff, management, or sponsors. Welcome to the CareGiver Reality Show with your hosts, David Levy and Paul Vadiato, who bring you more than a combined 25 years of practical experience, helping thousands of family caregivers, helping them find solutions to the challenges and frustrations presented by this important responsibility. So if you are in the position of caring for a spouse or a parent, a loved one who is no longer able to care for themselves, or if you know someone who is, this hour will be worth the listening. Now, let's tune in to today's edition of CareGiver Reality with your hosts, David Levy and Paul Vadiato.
Good evening, South Florida, America, and the world. This is another edition of the CareGiver Reality Hour on Tuesday at 5 o'clock. Drive time, which Paul just figured out. It's drive time from Vermont right straight down to the Florida Keys, so that's a pretty big area. And I want to thank our producer who just gave me some new numbers on our viewership, our listenership, and how long they're staying on. And I must tell you that we're growing very rapidly and that people are listening longer and longer. You're hearing us obviously on CareGiver Reality, or you're watching us on CareGiverReality.com. You're listening on WWNN 1470 AM here in South Florida, on iHeartRadio anywhere in the world, AMP2 TV, which rebroadcasts our program, as does the WWNN website as well. And we have a big show for you tonight, but if you want to call and ask a question, it's 1-888-565-1470. And Paul, how you doing?
Well, good evening, David, and good evening to our listeners. Welcome back.
All right.
I'm doing fine, thank you, and reviewed an old lesson learned in my week of caregiving.
Yes.
As the male of the species, we love to solve problems. Lesson learned, sometimes it's better just to listen and say nothing.
Oh, well, that's good just as a male spouse, irrespective of whether or not you're a caregiver.
Well, it was a remediation week for me.
Right, okay. Well, I know that Debbie had a little bit of a, either a cold or a little bit of a pulmonary issue, but nonetheless, I hope she had a good week. Suzette was feeling a little bit better this week as well, and is hoping that we'll be able to get her up to Asheville, North Carolina in a week or two to see her family because she hasn't seen them in years.
That is awesome. Yeah. I am so happy for her. And
right.
Happy
well, thank
for the
God
family.
that there's now an airline that flies from West Palm Beach directly to Asheville with, so that it's short enough that even if there's a problem, we can deal with it on either end. I want to announce that our guest tonight, who is sitting here with us in the studio, but for those of you on the radio, is Dr. Lisa Tartaglia, and I hope I pronounced that right?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, and she is a hospice doctor with Vitas here in South Florida. And the Vitas is a national hospice provider, and she's going to be giving us some insights into how they approach the whole perspective of hospice, explaining the difference, because so many of you constantly ask about the difference between palliative care and end-of-life care. Right. So we figured we'd bring in the expert and hear it right from her, and exactly what is the function of a hospice doctor in the whole scheme of things. So I'm really looking forward to that, and I hope the rest of you are as well. We'll be bringing you some interesting news highlights of things that are happening right now. One of the things that I do want to mention early on is there's a little bit of an issue. As part of our medical research charities, one of the underlying charities is Scripps Research out in California, just like Scripps Research here in Palm Beach County. And the University of Southern California has made an offer to acquire them and to bring them under their umbrella, which is causing the researchers no end of consternation, even though it may even out the flow a little bit, because as we all know, the National Institute of Health, which funds most of the research projects that go on in this country and elsewise, or they're not getting continuation funding, and this is a big problem. And here in Palm Beach, the county and the state made some very big concessions to bring scripts here in terms of money spent and grants and other things. And so this is being looked over very carefully. And if you read your local newspaper, you'll see that the head of scripts out in California, as well as locally, it's Ron Davis, I believe.
Yes.
Are all trying to discuss this while keeping whatever is going on in terms of the negotiations a secret. But we'll move on from there and remind you that this month we only have a few days left, but it is Alzheimer's and Brain Disease Month, and we will be discussing a few other things related to Alzheimer's. We'll be running a clip, and later on in the show we will actually be showing you from a live support group that I did this past Wednesday, a little segment of about 4 minutes with one of our caregivers speaking very candidly, and we'll be playing it for you, and you'll be able to see her speaking, and you won't find this anywhere else. Very few places in the country can you find a support group willing to go on camera and tell it like it is.
David, that is one of the most amazing pieces of film that I witnessed, and just the raw honesty of what's going on there. For those that have never attended a support group, this is real life happening, and you're going to get to see a piece of it today. Very fortunate that they're willing to do it.
And also, we posted the entire support group session on YouTube, where it's been watched very extensively, and you will hear people discussing, how we had discussed a few weeks back with Vicki Kind, the firestorm over emotional divorce. And one of the caregivers, because we were discussing it in this group, not only did she say, well, maybe, under the right circumstances, I might go out and have a cup of coffee with somebody, et cetera, et cetera. Her husband is still alive, but she said, this week I'm renewing my vows because they're having a renewal of vows at the assisted living facility, dementia facility where her husband is located, and it was such an interesting dichotomy.
Yes.
To listen to her talk in one breath about maybe this, and then the next breath saying I'm renewing my vows. So you will not see it or hear it anywhere else, and so YouTube has it. Freddie, have we posted it on our website yet? Okay, it's on the caregiverreality.com website. Go on, click live show, scroll over. We'll be on right now, but if you go down the archive, it should be either the first or second piece. Paul?
Yeah, and if any of our listeners or viewers have a comment or some thoughts on what they're seeing, you can write to either david@caregiverreality.com or paul@caregiverreality.com, because we really do look for your feedback.
Right. And we are putting in place something that we have decided we need to do, and we're putting a 1-800 number in.
Yes, that'll be coming.
For you to be able to reach Paul or me without having to go through either email, but right now we won't have it up for about another day or two, so next week we'll be announcing it. Before we reach for Lisa, some of the things in the news. According to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, unpaid caregivers are now providing 90% of long-term care for aging, ill, or disabled family members. This just happens to be in Brevard County, which is here in middle Florida. However, 160,000 boomers, yes, boomers, those of you that are in the car right now and listening, all right, and under the age
them
of...
is us.
Them is us, as Pogo would say. And there was a little clip or a little excerpt from the news blurb I was reading. I'll just take a moment and I'll pass it over to you, Paul. And two of those boomers, one is a woman by the name of Florence who has vascular dementia, which means she had a brain bleed somewhere along the way, either because of a stroke or some other event that has now caused dementia. And Frank, who used to love the sound of his girlfriend's laughter, is now her unpaid family caregiver. Frank has taken care of Florence every day for more than a year, dressing her, taking her to physical therapy, fighting for 8 months to get Florence, who is broke on Medicaid, to cover health care costs not taken care of by Medicare. Being turned down, he paid $1,350 last month out of his own pocket for her medicine until they won a second appeal. The point we're making about this is, for those of you that don't know, see it coming for yourself, a loved one, a spouse, do not, if you're over the age of 65, expect Medicare to pick up your long-term, if you need to be in a facility or even if you're looking for partial aid. But the only thing that Medicare is going to give you is some home care following an acute care stay of at least 72 hours in a hospital. So I listen to so many people who say, Medicare is going to help pay for my mom. Well, they may pay for a hospital or the doctor care, but they're certainly not paying for the facility, and everybody needs to keep that thought in mind. Paul?
Well, just a call for plan.
Right.
I mean, you can't start too early on that. David, also in the news, there was a rather disturbing report that came via AARP, American Association of Retired Persons, and they did a scorecard on long-term care, and it measured it in terms of affordability and access, and the state of Florida ranked 43 out of 50 in a total of 26 categories that they looked at. The bottom had to do with the quality of life, caregiving with adults with disabilities. It was just disheartening, David. It really was. And you can get onto their website, you can look at the specifics on where we were a little bit better, but where we fell down. Bottom line is, we have to take better care of our elders and take better care of our senior citizens.
Right. And if you want to see the actual interactive website that you can click in any state to take a look, it's the letter M, and the word scorecard.org. And once there, if you click on Florida, next to it, you can take a look across a myriad of categories. And if some of you have been listening for a while, you remember last year when we had on Scott Solkoff, the eminent elder law attorney who sat on the purple ribbon panel that had been put together by the state of Florida to evaluate the state of Florida on a whole variety of things, including its Alzheimer's readiness. I'm sorry to say that there really hasn't been a lot of implementation, and it's almost been a year, other than I know that the senator who was championing this upstate, that there was $3 million allocated to start to, look at what the Purple Ribbon Panel had to say and maybe start to take an inventory of caregivers. But we all know that's a drop in the bucket, and by the time the people are hired that are going to do it and the overhead, there isn't really a lot left. And $3 million doesn't go as far as it used to.
No, it doesn't. And, David, ultimately, the power rests with our listeners, because Election Day is coming up in November. I know here in Florida, the governor is running for re-election, many of the state representatives. After you check out where your state ranks, you may want to contact your government elected representatives and let your feelings be known. That is what's going to make a difference, because it's not going to come just out of thin air. It's going to come out of people demanding that change make it happen.
And, we live in an aging world. We have an aging workplace. We have an aging population. And aging alone, I can tell you as a gerontologist, is not a bad thing, other than we'd all like to continue to be the old Pepsi generation or generation millennials. But we can't go back. All right, and so we try and do the best that we can going forward. But a lot of us along the way didn't do the best job of taking care of ourselves. We have runaway obesity in this country, which is causing diabetes, which is putting great stress on people's bodies, etc., causing rheumatoid arthritis, whatever. We can ask the doctor about that, even though it doesn't fall directly into hospice care, but it certainly falls under her medical acumen. And so we have to be prepared. We're living much longer than we ever anticipated. We didn't put away possibly enough money. We don't want to find ourselves the same way that Frank did with Florence, that I just mentioned a few minutes ago, dead broke, all right, waiting on Medicaid, and who knows, good as it is, how long can we keep funding Medicaid into an aging world if the population can only get the maximum amount of Medicaid in a nursing home? And can we do a great job with the unpaid family caregiver to maintain a home environment for a person, I'll just keep it in Alzheimer's for the moment, over the long haul without directly supporting them? And this is not just a question of having somebody, no references, I think they do a great job, to home health care personnel, but it's a tough job. It's a tough job for them. And when they've given you their 2, 3, 4 hours that Medicare might allow, or even Medicaid for that matter, you're on your own. And so it really pays. If you listen to that video of the support group last Wednesday, most of those were Alzheimer's caregivers. And people say, wow, those are older people. I don't relate to that. I'm younger. Well, let me tell you, those are our wisdom warriors. Just like, and Paul and I were discussing it, just like the American Indians had their tribal elders who passed on the information on how do you hunt a deer and, you know, make a pair of moccasins. It gets passed down by the wise ones who have done it already. And so irrespective of whatever age you are, there is a lot to be learned by listening, and not only that, but to appreciate what a really good, effective, and not just because I facilitated, all right, a great support group can do. And we can't forget that. Paul?
These support groups are so important in what they teach us, because these people have gone up against the system. They've dealt with many of the things that you, our listeners, are going through, no matter what illness it may be. And there's a lot of information and there's a lot of comfort in there, and I can't advise you any stronger than I am. Please take a look at the full support group, because you won't see it anywhere else.
Yeah.
David?
And we were just taking a look at the numbers before we go to the break.
Okay.
And we're finding that we're increasing the viewer time. It's up to almost 32 minutes of people watching, so they're actually watching right through the first unofficial commercial that we can't control for Oreos or the Planters Peanut Man. But I'm delighted to see it. And we're coming up on 5:20, and we're going to take a station break, and when we come back, medical research charities, I want to give a shout out to some very important people, and then right after that, we're going to go to Dr. Tartaglia.
I am Paul Battiato, president of CareGiver Reality and a full-time spousal caregiver. When I arrive at the office to begin my workday, my caregiving role doesn't get left outside the door. My day is often interrupted dealing with issues at home. That is time not focused on my job. I am but one of the 50 million unpaid family caregivers. Caregiving in the workplace is a costly productivity issue that is only going to increase as our workforce gets older. Caregiver-friendly firms retain hard-to-replace team members, tend to attract better talent, and get out in front of the productivity loss that exists everywhere. Now, new questions are being raised as to possible exposure to discrimination lawsuits as employees question whether their role as a caregiver is damaging them, as promotions are denied or reprimands increase that might result in a termination. Caregiving in the workplace, left unaddressed, is costing your firm money, reputation, and possible litigation. Caregiver Reality brings education and training solutions to the workplace. Let our experienced team help evaluate your unique situation. Contact me at paul@caregiverreality.com. That's paul@caregiverreality.com. Do it today.
Are you a family caregiver? Are you taking care of a spouse or loved one who can no longer take care of himself or herself? Are you dealing with Alzheimer's disease and don't know what to do? Do you feel burned out, frustrated, and just don't know where to turn? You've tried doctors, lawyers, and mental health professionals and have come to realize that they don't have practical answers to these questions. What you need are experts, non-clinical family caregivers with 25 years of active experience helping thousands of family caregivers like yourself. People who can help you provide a better quality of life for yourself and your loved one. Who you need are David Levy or Paul Vadiato. Reach David at david@caregiverreality.com or reach Paul at paul@caregiverreality.com and let them help you pick the right path towards improving the quality of life for you, the caregiver, and your loved one. CFC support helps fund research. You can too. Each year, thousands of men and women serving their country in the U.S. military, as well as other employees of the federal government and the U.S. Postal Service, provide support for medical research to find treatments and cures for diseases. This is done through the Combined Federal Campaign, an annual workplace giving campaign that allows eligible individuals to support charities, such as those that conduct medical research, through a payroll deduction. Money donated this way to the medical research charities and its member organizations helps fund research to fight diseases from Alzheimer's to cancer, multiple sclerosis, blindness, breathing disorders, and much more. Or a federal government employee to support research to help you or those you love that are suffering from an illness or disease. Donations to our not-for-profit tax-exempt organizations are tax-deductible and provide a vital source of funding in the fight to defeat some of life's most dreaded diseases. Please visit the website of the Medical Research Charities, which can be found at medicalresearchcharities.org. That's all one word, medicalresearchcharities.org. On that website, you can learn more about our member charities and make a donation in support of the research they're conducting for a specific disease or family of diseases. You can make a donation to Medical Research Charities itself and support the work of all our member charities. Please visit our website today, medicalresearchcharities.org. Become a part of Joining Forces to Find a Cure. This is Caregiver Reality with gerontologist David Levy and caregiver expert Paul Vadiato, who ask you to call in and speak with him on the air toll-free at 888-565-1470. That's 888-565-1470 to share a story or important information. Now, back to today's Caregiver Reality Show.
And we're back, and I hope none of you turned away and that we have not only our regular audience, but during that break you called your friends and said, you better turn on WWNN 1470 or get a hold of us on iHeart.
Except those that are driving.
Yes, right. Well, maybe they were doing it hands-free with their Bluetooth. So, anyway, from Vermont to the Keys, it's drive time. And I figure it's all the way out to Ohio before we start changing time zones. So there's a lot of people out there in the car, and I hope they're listening, and I hope they're learning something. You just heard the commercial for Medical Research Charities, which is the umbrella organization for 27 different medical research organizations, and this week we're doing a shout out for Alzheimer's because it is Alzheimer's month, and one of the major Alzheimer's research centers is at Scripps in La Jolla, California, as well as the one here in Jupiter, Florida. And these folks are really edge of the envelope on what they're trying to do. We had on Dr. Mark Brody last week, who was giving you a little bit of feet on the ground. He's a principal investigator located here in South Florida on Alzheimer's, and he'll be going to Copenhagen within the next month, where the international convention regarding dementia and Alzheimer's and find out what it is that others are doing that we may not be aware of, and he'll be a guest on in the near future when he returns to give us an update. In the meantime, just to touch base back on Scripps La Jolla as well as Scripps Jupiter, they call it the Alzheimer's Research Center of America, and the scientists that are working there tirelessly to find new treatments, new therapies to fight Alzheimer's disease. And with your help in making a charitable contribution, they can identify the causes of the disease, find new medicines to combat the illness and the effects that are taking place in more than 5 million people here in America, and that's probably a low number because there are a lot more that just haven't been diagnosed, and 30 to 40 million around the world, and that number's probably low because many areas of the world are not in a position to even diagnose or figure out that their loved one is suffering from a dementia. So if you want to go ahead, www.alzheimersresearchcenter.org, and that's where the that's where the Alzheimer's Research Center of America is located. alzheimersresearchcenter.org, and with your help, because once again, as I said earlier, the NIH, National Institute of Health funding, is being reduced, and we have got to keep everybody focused on doing something about Alzheimer's. It is one of the worst diseases out there because it takes away the person you know and love, and as a caregiver, it rips you apart. Not to say that other illnesses don't, but when you lose the ability to communicate with your loved one, to share and care a lifetime, you don't know what you're dealing with until it happens, and I hope everyone listening never has it happen, but boy, it's out there.
Please be generous.
Yes, do everything you can. And now, Dr. Lisa. All right, almost sounds like a great television program. Lisa, welcome.
Thank you.
And we're so happy to have you. I know that you are a hospice doctor with VITAS, which is a national hospice organization. And let's start out with, how'd you decide, whether after medical school, after practice, that you decided you wanted to get into being a hospice doctor?
Okay. I actually made the decision to become a hospice doctor at my graduation party for medical school when my grandmother had a massive stroke and a heart attack at my graduation. At that moment, my dad was faced with end-of-life care for her or more aggressive curative care, and I watched him go through the process of signing her up to hospice, and he was treated as though he was buying a used car versus services. In the area of which I grew up in, hospice is not as big as it is in South Florida, and they're not as knowledgeable. At that moment, I realized that I wanted to really make a difference in my medical education. I went on to pursue family practice residency, and all throughout my residency, I was attracted to my senior citizen patients, being their advocate, discussing end-of-life care and do not resuscitate orders with my colleagues, and making sure that they lived as comfortable of life at their end of life.
Well, that's interesting, and you had an interesting expression, I guess, for your dad's experience was, you felt like he was buying a used car, or they treated him like he was buying a used car. Could you just explain that a teeny bit more?
What I mean by that is my dad is not, he's an accountant, he does not have a medical background, so they just presented him with these beautiful portfolio of pictures of, you know, what to expect at the end of life care, and basically treated him as if we were going through different elements of car buying, like air conditioning. Do you want a car with air conditioning, with the sunroof, with that? And I remember him turning to me saying, I feel like I'm buying a used car here. Like, it was just very overwhelming. We were going through a major catastrophe. I'm from a small, close-knit Italian family. She was the matriarch of our family. It was devastating to all of us, and we just felt it was just interesting to be as the granddaughter, not as the doctor, and try to step back and see how my whole family felt through this process.
Well, that's certainly something that I can understand. Wow, at graduation, certainly was a formative
She always
impact.
had to steal my thunder, even at my graduation.
Just when you were ready to flip the tassel,
Exactly.
she had a heart attack. Well, I'm sorry to hear that, but I'm delighted that it at least pointed you in the direction. You and I had an opportunity to meet a month or two back at Arden Court, where you were doing your hospice doctor services, and I was delighted when you said that you could join us. Paul, I know you have a couple of questions for Lisa.
I think one of the big confusion that is out there is exactly what does hospice do? We hear the words palliative care, we hear end of life, and many people sort of meld them together. That's not really the case, is it?
No. Palliative care is it is a comprehensive treatment plan for patients that have chronic illnesses. They do not necessarily have to be terminal illnesses, but chronic conditions such as patients that could have congestive heart failure, dementia patients, COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, and even cancers. They can be seeking curative measures, but if palliative care treats their pain management, whether it be physical, emotional, spiritual, and we treat the whole body as well as the family and the caregivers with an interdisciplinary team.
So you don't have to get off of your therapy.
No.
All right.
That's the major difference. When you sign on to hospice, you normally have to have a 6-month or less prognosis to live, but that does not mean that if you do not pass away in that 6 months, Alzheimer's patients especially live a long time on hospice, that they are thrown off the program. They just have to be deemed medically necessary to stay on by a doctor. As myself, we go out every 60 days to reevaluate their appropriateness for service. And when you're on hospice services, usually at that point you're not seeking curative treatment for your disease.
You're talking about end of life.
End of life.
All right,
more.
but palliative, if I was on a treatment, chemotherapy, whatever, for cancer, but I was suffering pain and discomfort, I could still continue, but seek out pain relief and other positive things and support from my family by engaging hospice for palliative care.
Absolutely.
So there's kind of a bright blue line between palliative, not that you don't continue palliative into end of life, but it's done in a different way in that, if I'm correct, once you cross over into end of life, you're not still seeking those therapeutic interventions.
Correct. But if you're in the palliative program, you can still be doing the more aggressive treatments such as chemo and different treatments for any disease element depending on what it is. But for our patients, even when they go onto hospice, there's a big misconception that people sign up for hospice and 2 weeks later they pass away, and that's not correct, because I treat the elderly population in South Palm Beach County, and my patients can stay on service for 2-3 years. I continue to treat them and their infections, but I have a discussion with the family as to when we are going to stop those treatments.
Doctor, you mentioned the elderly patients here in Florida, and as you know, we are all over the world. What, if anything, is available to those that are younger? Let's say a 24-year-old that's been diagnosed with leukemia. Would they qualify?
Yes, a 25-year-old that's diagnosed with leukemia, absolutely. If they're going through aggressive treatment, meaning their chemotherapy and radiation, they would be more, they can join a palliative team. They're usually affiliated with a hospice provider at this point. There are very few that are individually operated. I think that will be a wave of the future. And also, when they decide that they've tried all aggressive treatments and there is no cure, they can definitely sign up for hospice, and we treat all ages.
Okay, so in other words, if I'm 24 years old and I have an aggressive form of leukemia, so just as we were talking about, and I'm not over the age of 65, when hospice steps in for a younger person, when you're over 65, Medicare steps in for you. What happens? Does it go on private pay if you don't have major medical, or what happens? Will Medicare or some organization like that step in to pay for hospice in a younger person?
If you don't have insurance, we try to qualify patients for Medicaid, and Medicaid will pick up the fee for hospice services. However, every hospice provider has has donations, and they have a nonprofit leg of any hospice in the country, and we always offer care. No one is turned away despite not having payment source.
Wow,
that's amazing.
That's just wonderful. All right, so that in moving forward and looking at the Florida situation, where we do have large amounts of elderly, obviously we have a disproportionate amount of dementia compared to other states, and there's only so many doctors, nurses, etc. Now, I know you work for a private organization, but how do you see your staffing capability in an aging world going forward? Do you have I know there has to be 5%, volunteers, but beyond that, how are you doing in keeping up with the staff that you need to support you and the patient?
We have per diem staff that's always available, and I think most hospice providers need to have that, especially in Palm Beach County and all of South Florida, because we're very, we are faced with the aging population, and there's a lot of patients that need our services. So there are per diem staff that's available, and I just see that the growth is going to be tremendous as palliative care and hospice goes out into the future. They're going to have our organizations are going to just grow by leaps and bounds.
Now, when you hire somebody per diem or by the day, what training? Obviously, you just don't pick them up because they have a nursing degree on a street corner.
Right.
What training does even a per diem individual go through in order to be part of the hospice organization?
Most of the per diem staff, they have the opportunity to not only train with a nurse for several weeks to 2 months. They have to go through testing on our end-of-life medications and how to administer them and what signs and symptoms are. There's a lot of signs and symptoms you see at the end of life that the nurse needs to be aware of. And not only that, some of them actually will come out and make house calls with me and other physicians that are available, just so they can see how you talk with families, because it's not only in hospice and palliative medicine, I'm not treating the patient. The patients, I always say to my staff, they're the easy one. It's the family. They're the ones that are going to have to live with themselves for the decisions that they're making and want to have a positive outcome of a very bad situation and have a positive feeling.
It sounds like exactly what Caregiver Reality is about.
All about, yeah.
The patient has got a lot of folks focused at them and dealing with the disease. It's the caregiver and the family that are making those tough decisions, just like your dad felt, at the
Right.
time with
Right.
your mother. And we hear that all the time, especially in dementia, about placement in facilities and the guilt that comes with that, and all of the other attendant issues, and especially if you have, and I'm sure you run into this, I do from a family care mediator perspective, is that you get family that can't get to a consensus. One daughter says, all right, I understand this, and the next one says, you're killing mommy. And so it really leaves a lot of conflict out there. You must have a lot of that you see.
Yes.
And
Yes, and I rely on my interdisciplinary team to help me with that. We have social worker, non-denominational chaplain, my nurse, myself, and then even a certified nursing assistant. That's all part of the team, and we all work together to try to help the patient.
Lisa, if I may, it's such a difficult experience coming at a very difficult times. We know there's an evaluation done. When you finally do show up and you're making your first visit, tell our audience, if you will, typically what do you hear from the patient and what do you hear from the caregivers? What might they expect?
Depending on, the disease progression, usually a lot of times the patients are worried about their caregiver, and that's what I see every day. No matter if they're demented, I have a dementia patient that's not doing too well right now, and she's in a crisis. She kept saying, no, every time I kept saying, your daughter's going to be coming tomorrow. We're going to see your daughter, because she's not that far along in her disease process, but she knows that that's an imposition and she doesn't want to impose. Caregivers are relieved because we answer all the questions that have not been answered in the medical system when their patients, unfortunately, are getting readmitted into the hospital. A nobody really sits down and talks to them. So we answer a lot of questions and allow them to be at peace. And a lot of times the caregivers will say, "Oh, thank God, now I can sleep at night after what you just spent, hours going through."
You are the advocate.
Yes, that's
For
why I love
both.
my job.
Right. Well, I must tell you that it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. We could probably do an entire show around you, and in the near future I would love to have you back, because I have a whole list of questions
Okay.
that I never had an opportunity to get to. But Lisa, you are a very articulate, passionate doctor who truly believes in what she's doing and the care and the support that you give families. And I can't personally thank you enough, and for being here and for sharing.
We know taking time out of your busy schedule was difficult. You've just added so much for our listeners. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Right.
Thank you so much for having me.
Our pleasure. And we're going to be going to a break, and when we come back, I want you to know that you'll be listening to that clip from the support group last Wednesday, and then we'll be making a few comments about it. So hang in there, stay tuned. You're listening to us on the Caregiver Reality Hour on WWNN 1470 AM.
CFC support helps fund research. You can too. Each year, thousands of men and women serving their country in the U.S. military, as well as other employees of the federal government and the U.S. Postal Service, provide support for medical research to find treatments and cures for diseases. This is done through the Combined Federal Campaign, an annual workplace giving campaign that allows eligible individuals to support charities, such as those that conduct medical research, through a payroll deduction. Money donated this way to the medical research charities and its member organizations helps fund research to fight diseases from Alzheimer's to cancer, multiple sclerosis, blindness, breathing disorders, and much more. The diseases included afflict people of all ages, from the very young to the very old. You don't need to be a member of the military or a federal government employee to support research to help you or those you love that are suffering from an illness or disease. Donations to our not-for-profit tax-exempt organizations are tax-deductible and provide a vital source of funding in the fight to defeat some of life's most dreaded diseases. Please visit the website of the Medical Research Charities, which can be found at medicalresearchcharities.org. That's all one word, medicalresearchcharities.org. On that website, you can learn more about our member charities and make a donation in support of the research they're conducting for a specific disease or family of diseases. You can make a donation to Medical Research Charities itself and support the work of all our member charities. Please visit our website today, medicalresearchcharities.org. Become a part of Joining Forces to Find a Cure. Are you a family caregiver? Are you taking care of a spouse or loved one who can no longer take care of himself or herself? Are you dealing with Alzheimer's disease and don't know what to do? Do you feel burned out, frustrated, and just don't know where to turn? You've tried doctors, lawyers, and mental health professionals and have come to realize that they don't have practical answers to these questions. What you need are experts, non-clinical family caregivers with 25 years of active experience helping thousands of family caregivers like yourself. People who can help you provide a better quality of life for yourself and your loved one. Who you need are David Levy or Paul Vadiato. Reach David at david@caregiverreality.com or reach Paul at caregiverreality.com and let them help you pick the right path towards improving the quality of life for you, the caregiver, and your loved one. This is Caregiver Reality with gerontologist David Levy and caregiver expert Paul Vadiato, who ask you to call in and speak with him on the air toll-free at 888-565-1470. That's 888-565-1470 to share a story or important information. Now, back to today's Caregiver Reality Show.
I wanted to say I was in denial for 2 years about Buddy's condition. Everyone else realized it but me. And it was my daughter who went on the computer and checked out about dementia and Alzheimer's. She also was the one who got me to come to the group. She was given about 4 or 5 places to go. She was very smart. When she left me, she says, I'm leaving you this list. I would like you to look into going because I think you need help. Yeah, okay, leave the list. I looked at it, and I chose where you originally were. I don't know why I chose that. There were others closer. But that was the best thing for me, because I was in denial. And I didn't say much at first. And I listened. And everything that everyone around was saying, eventually, it came out with Buddy. And when I had to put him into a facility, it was my kids who did it, because they saw what it was doing to me. I still was in denial. I would not tell him what his real problem was. He kept asking, there's something wrong with me. What is it? And I only said it was his diabetes, his heart. I could not bring myself to use the word dementia to him, which may have made it harder for him, knowing...
For you, you were keeping a secret.
Yes, and it did take a toll. But listening to the group, I learned not only the comfort it gave me, but the knowledge that when I was faced with some of the things that people had said, I looked back and I said, oh, so-and-so said this is how they handled it. I learned to be a liar because of not wanting to tell him the truth. If I was going someplace, it was a little white lie.
Which is always acceptable.
Which I learned from this group. Without the group, I don't think I would have gotten as far as I have. Everyone was there for me while I was going through it. After he passed away, which will be a year and another week, and even my illnesses. This group has given me so much strength that I don't think I can go without it. It really killed me not being here for 5 months.
You missed it.
Because of the support. But I still got it. The people that called me, that came to visit me.
You got the teddy bear.
Yes, I did. But to the end, Buddy realized I had spoken to you and we got hospice. That was the best thing to do. Because he begged one day to the nurse, why don't you let me go? I've had it. I don't like this life. And it hit me and my daughter at that moment, what he was trying to tell us. And they brought in hospice.
You never had to say a thing. And he knew it all along. The only thing he was asking for was validation.
Right.
Buddy was not dumb.
No.
All right?
No.
He just wanted a name.
And when hospice came in and they made him very comfortable, it was our wishes anyway. That's what we had written a long time ago. It was the most peaceful week that we had with him. That he went out in dignity, and it was his wish, because he even told the hospice nurse, do you want me to give you a punch in the face? And she said, not really. Well, why don't you understand? I do not want any more medicine. It's not helping me. Just let me go.
And we're back, and you just heard a live piece of last week's support group. If you were watching, you saw it. If you were on radio, you heard it. The woman that was speaking, Eleanor, couldn't be more candid about what she was talking about. Her husband, Buddy, when he said, I don't want any more, I want to go, fit right in with exactly what Lisa was talking about. They had hospice. They supported them. The caregiver family, the group that you saw around the table, were all part of her support group for her and the family. Everyone turned out at Buddy's funeral, as well as the family that you would expect. And we have supported her throughout the post loss of her husband, and she has become an invaluable contributor to both the support group and others that are now going through what she's going through. So in repeating what we said earlier, the fact that Eleanor may be a little bit older than some of you that are listening, the things that she's talking about, the way her husband responded, is no different almost regardless of what age you are. And the perspective that she brings and the comments about her husband in the last few days about, you want to punch in the face? Because I want to keep going. Yeah, I don't want to keep going. And so you heard it here first. You won't hear this anywhere else. Paul and I went through the internet last week. We can't find one live, real support group anywhere. So when we call it Caregiver Reality, we're calling it like it is. Paul?
David, I think the one of the real takeaways from the clip that our listeners were either listening to or were watching is that the way the group coalesces and helps one another arrive at an answer, rather than it emanating from the facilitator, you, they're helping each other and giving their own ideas, and they're formulating what might work because it might not work the next time, what they've done in the past.
Well, if anyone were to go and now watch the full tape, or whatever you call the digital download, I'm old, you will find that while I have pieces in there where I discuss a specific topic to give information, once they start, the smartest thing a good facilitator can do is shut up and let the group. The only thing you're there to do at that point is to manage so that somebody doesn't overrun it and you keep a level of orderliness. But these people and the story they're telling is so real, and you just can't be anything but entranced by what you're hearing. This is real life, raw, unabridged, unscripted, and very unique, and we'll be bringing you more of this. While I have a moment, next week my special guest, he'll be calling in because he's on the road, is a gentleman by the name of Ron Calhoun, and he works for one of the largest insurers in the United States. He's their national healthcare practice leader, and he has insights into where things are going in terms of healthcare, where things are going in terms of services. He's got a handle on Medicaid, Medicare, and he's a very unique and articulate individual. I've known him for a long time. He and I at times speak in tandem, and he's a wonderful gentleman, and I know the audience is going to really appreciate the insights that he brings. And so I'm looking forward to having him next week, and hopefully all of you out there, drive time and whatever else, will be listening in. Paul?
Yeah, I mean, getting that balcony view of where we're going, I think, is important. You know, with this Affordable Health Care Act has changed a lot. Where it's going in the future, I think getting some different viewpoints is going to be very, very helpful in making that decision. You know, just getting back to the film clip, if I may, for a second, David. You know, I made some comments at the beginning of the show about learning to keep my mouth shut and just listen to what people are saying. That's really where that came from listening to that conversation of what her husband had to say. This is what I want. It wasn't an argument. It was a statement of fact, and the caregiver just responded to what was being asked. That is a beautiful thing.
Yes. And next week, we will also be playing, for those of you in drive time that may not have an opportunity to go to the Caregiver Reality website, we'll be playing another clip of another individual who had a very, very interesting perspective on things. I'm not going to give away, I'm going to tease you all, but you will find it as interesting as Eleanor just was, and just as illuminating. And I want to thank everybody that was involved in that. We shot it at Manor Care in Delray. We get a lot of support from them and Ardencourt, the dementia facility that's right behind it, and a big shout out to Marcia and Arlene, who are doing a phenomenal job over there. And tomorrow night, unique as it may be, 14 people whose spouses are in that facility are renewing their vows in spite of their wedding vows. And they've got a rabbi, a priest, and I offered to come in as a notary because I've married a few people, but they think they have it ecumenically covered, and I think it's a wonderful thing, and really, really focuses on the quality that, forget what Arden brings, the fact that these people who have been through so much still want to continue the feeling of their marriage and renewing their vows, because they would have done it had dementia not interfered, and Arden is giving them a wonderful opportunity to do just that. I really, really commend them.
Quality of life, dignity.
Yep.
That's what it's all about.
Right. And so I was there this afternoon. I was doing a support group before I came here, and they had 14 bouquets, and they were really planning a great event. And so it just shows you folks that people that really know what they're doing when it comes to dementia can keep life going, even though their loved one that may be in the facility cognitively can't connect all the pieces. But when you look at the glow in their eyes, you know that deep down inside there's somebody there. They may not be able to communicate, but there's a human being in there that is entitled to the dignity and the respect that any other human has and should be allowed. And regardless of whether they can communicate back or keep a thought, they are human beings just like you and Paul and me. We have less than a minute left. I want to go out of my way to thank our guest again, Lisa Tartaglia, a wonderful, wonderful doctor doing incredibly wonderful things for people.
She really is.
And so I want to say, South Florida, America, and the world, we were delighted to have you with us. We look forward to having you on the Caregiver, or listening to the Caregiver Reality Hour next week, drive time 5 to 6 on the East Coast and wherever else you're hearing us around the world. Paul?
Good evening, everyone, and caregivers, take care of yourself this week. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for joining us for this week's Caregiver Reality Show. Each week, David Levy, a gerontologist, and Paul Vadiato, a caregiver expert with a combined over 25 years of experience, providing practical and realistic help to caregivers struggling to keep up with the needs of a loved one who are unable to care for himself or herself. To reach David Levy, email him at david@caregiverreality.com. Or to reach Paul Vadiato, email paul@caregiverreality.com. And find out more online. Just go to caregiverreality.com. See you next week for another exciting show of Caregiver Reality. The opinions expressed on the preceding sponsored program were strictly those of its hosts, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of the state.